Hi, Serena here, and today I'll be reading Paddington Bear by Michael Bond and illustrated by R.W. Alley. Mr. and Mrs. Brown first met Paddington on a railway platform. In fact, that's how he came to have such an unusual name for a bear, because Paddington was the name of the station. The Browns were waiting to meet their daughter Judy when Mr. Brown noticed something small and furry near the left luggage office. "It looks like a bear," he said. "A bear?" repeated Miss Brown. "On Paddington Station? Don't be silly, Henry. There can't be." But Mr. Brown was right. It was sitting on that old leather suitcase marked "Wanted on Voyage." As they drew near it and politely raised its hat. "Good afternoon," it said. "May I help you?" "It's very kind of you," said Mr. Brown, "but as a matter of fact, we were wondering if we could help you." "You're a very small bear," said Miss Brown. "Where are you from?" The bear looked around carefully before replying. "Dark as Peru. I'm not really supposed to be here at all. I'm a stowaway." You don't mean that to say that you've come all the way from South America on your own?" exclaimed Miss Brown. "Whatever did you do for your food?" Unlocking the suitcase, the bear took out an almost empty glass jar. "I ate marmalade," it said. "Bears like marmalade." Miss Brown looked at the label around the bear's neck. It said quite simply, "Please look after this bear. Thank you." "Oh, Henry," she cried, "we can't leave him all by himself. There's no knowing what might happen to him. Can't he come home with us? Stay with us?" repeated Mr. Brown nervously. He looked down at the bear. Would you like that?" he asked. "That is," he added hastily, "if you have nothing else planned." "Oh, yes," replied the bear. "I'd love that very much. I've got nowhere to go, and everyone seems to be in such a hurry." "That settles it," said Miss Brown. "Now you must be thirsty after your journey. Mr. Brown can get you some tea while I go and meet our daughter Judy." "But Mary," said Mr. Brown, "we don't even know its name." Miss Brown thought for a moment. "I know," she said. "We'll call him Paddington, after the station." "Paddington?" The bear tested it several times to make sure. "It sounds very important." Mr. Brown tried it out next. "Follow me, Paddington," he said. "I'll take you to the snack bar." Mr. Brown was as good as his word. Paddington had never seen so many snacks on one tray. He didn't know which to try first. He was so hungry and thirsty he climbed on top of the table to take a better look. Mr. Brown turned away, pretending he had tea with a bear on Paddington Station every day of his life. "Henry," cried Miss Brown when she arrived with Judy, "what are you doing with that poor bear?" Paddington jumped up to raise his hat in haste. He trod on a strawberry tart and skidded on the cream and fell over backwards into his cup of tea. "I think we'd better go before anything else happens," said Mr. Brown. Judy took off Paddington's paw. "Come along," she said. "We'll take you home, and you can meet Miss Bird and my brother Jonathan." Mr. Brown led the way to the waiting taxi. "Number 32 Windsor Gardens, please," he said. The driver stared at Paddington. Bear is extra, he growled. Sticky bears is twice as much. And make sure none of it comes off on my interior. It was clean when I set out this morning. The sun was shining, and as they drove out the station, there were cars and big red buses everywhere. Paddington waved to some people waiting at a bus stop, and several of them waved back. It was quite friendly. Paddington tapped on the driver's shoulder. It isn't a bit like Darkest Peru, he announced. The man jumped at the sound of Paddington's voice. Cream, he said bitterly. Cream and jam all over me coat. He slid the window shut behind him. Oh dear Henry, murmured Miss Brown. I wonder if we're doing the right thing. Fortunately, before anyone had time to answer, they arrived at Windsor Gardens, and Judy helped Paddington onto the pavement. Now you're going to eat Miss Bird, she said. She looks after us. She's a bit fierce at times, but she doesn't really mean it. I'm sure you'll like her. Paddington felt his knees begun to wobble. I'm sure I shall. If you say so, he replied. The thing is, will she like me? Goodness gracious, exclaimed Miss Bird. What have you got there? It's not a what? Said Judy. It's a bear called Paddington, and he's coming to stay with us. A bear? Said Miss Bird as Paddington raised his hat. Well, he has good manners, and I'll say that for him. I'm afraid I stepped on a jam tart by mistake, said Paddington. I can see that, said Miss Bird. You better have a bath before you're very much older. Judy can turn it on for you. I dare say you'll be wanting some marmalade too, I think she likes you, whispered Judy. Paddington had never been in a bathroom before, and while the water was running, he made himself at home. First of all, he tried writing his new name in the steam on the mirror. Then he used Mr. Brown's shaving foam to draw a map of Peru on the floor. It wasn't until a drip landed on his head he remembered what he was supposed to be doing. He soon discovered getting into a bath is one thing, but it's quite another matter getting out, especially when it's full of soapy water. Paddington tried calling out help, first in a quiet voice to not disturb anyone, then loudly, Help! Help! When that didn't work, he began boiling the water out with his hat, but the hat had several holes in it, and the anti-rubber Peru soon turned into sea foam. Suddenly, Jonathan and Judy burst into the bathroom and lifted dripping Paddington onto the floor. Thank goodness you're all right, cried Judy. We heard you calling out. Fancy making such a mess, said Jonathan admiringly. You should have pulled the plug out. Oh, said Paddington. I never thought of that. When Paddington came downstairs, he looked so clean no one could possibly be cross with him. His fur was all soft and silky, and his nose gleamed, and his paws had lost all traces of jam and cream. The Browns made a room for him in a small armchair. Miss Bird brought him a pot of tea and placed hot toast with marmalade and buttered and a pot of tea and a plate of hot buttered toast with and marmalade. Now, said Miss Brown, you must tell us all about yourself. I'm sure you've had lots of adventures. I have, said Paddington honestly. I think there's things are always happening to me. I'm that sort of bear. He settled back in the armchair. I was brought up by my Aunt Lucy in darkest Peru, he began, but she had to go into a home for retired bear as in Lima. He closed his eyes thoughtfully and a hush fell over him. Everyone was waiting. In the room was waiting expectantly. After a while, then nothing happened. They began to get restless. Mr. Brown tried coughing. Then he reached across and poked Paddington. "Well, I never," he said. "I do believe he's fast asleep. After all that's happened to him," said Miss Brown. Is it any wonder?" The end. Bye.
We are Little Miracle. We need your help.
Please donate what you can. Click the donate button below or text RAINBOW to 70660 to donate £3.